my path to pastoral work, it was through the church was my dormitory,
Yes.
and having had the opportunity to have thousands of young people over the years. I was able to be a dean for almost 30 years, and through all those years, being able to make connections and opportunities to lead young people to know Jesus better.
In today's episode, we meet Hector, a young man that from a young age, he had experienced so many different religion background because of his family, and to finally find for himself what he believed and actually bring even his mom to it, and then becoming a great leader in our church today. With you, a special edition of Tea Talks. Hector, thank you so much for accepting the invitation. I'm really excited to do this so I can get to know you a little better. We work together, but this is an opportunity that we can get to know each other a little more. So thank you for accepting the invitation.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
This is great. Why don't you start with telling me a little bit about your childhood? How did you grow up? Where? Parents, family?
Okay. I grew up in a divorced home. My father divorced my mother or separated from my mother when she was still pregnant with me.
Oh.
So I'm the youngest of four children, or four siblings. My mother later adopted my youngest cousin, so I have a younger brother who's really my cousin, which was really interesting. But we're very close even till today. Grew up in New Jersey. My family's originally from the island of Puerto Rico.
Mm.
My mother moved here when she was very young and grew up in New Jersey, and that's where I was educated and began in the church and met my wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were in a divorced home, but it was a large family with
Yes.
pretty much 5 of you at some point.
Yes.
And since your childhood, was it a Christian household?
My mother always tried her best to raise us in a Christian home. I think we church topped for a while. I remember at one point being Catholic. I remember another point being Jehovah's Witness.
Okay.
I remember another point visiting Pentecostal church.
Okay.
And it wasn't until later that I was introduced to the Adventist church. Most of my siblings today are not Adventists.
Mm-hmm.
My mother eventually baptized into the Adventist church in 2001.
And that's where she stayed.
And praise the Lord, she stayed.
Okay.
Yes.
How was it for you as a young man? Okay, your mom is going to different churches, and then she finally chose a church that she wanted to be part of it. When you were like in your teen years or young adult, was there any part of you that started questioning, do I believe this? Is this my mom?
In those years, my teenage years, I remember that's when we were Jehovah's Witness.
Okay.
And I remember attending the church services, but not really feeling connected at all. We spent a lot of time in those services where we, dealt with the Watchtower Bible studies, but they never separated. They never had separate programming for youth. Mm-hmm. And I went to church with many youth, but we just said hi and goodbye. We never, mingled. We never got to know each other. Some of them were my classmates in school, but at church, we never did any things together. And I remember that being something that bothered me a lot. That was even before the theology questions. It was mainly not feeling like I was a part of a church family. I was just part of a group of people.
You went to your study, you came home, but it wasn't like connection between the people, especially the youth.
Exactly. It was separation. It was, we went there, we sat, we left.
Got it.
There was no gathering. There was no social life to it at all.
Okay. Were you there for a long time?
We were Jehovah's Witness probably about 10 years.
So basically your teen years were out there.
That's correct.
Okay. When then were you guys introduced to the church that you guys belong today?
I attended a public high school.
Mhm.
I met a young woman who became my girlfriend,
Mhm.
who introduced me to the Adventist
Is
church.
that your wife today?
That is my wife today.
Okay, so it wasn't your mom. It was actually your girlfriend.
Oh, no, I introduced my mom. Or my mother had already had a previous knowledge of the Adventist church, but it was through my wife, who was then my
So
girlfriend.
you're the one who brought your mom, not the opposite. Okay.
Yes.
That is quite interesting.
Yes.
So how did you meet your wife?
Well, she had a locker that was a few doors very close to one of my classes right after lunch. And it was the 10th grade. And I would go to my class and she would be at her locker and we would just catch glances of each other and I'd smile like that cheesy, nerdy smile. And she would smile back, and it took me a long, long time.
You seem to be like a shy young man.
Yeah, it took me quite a while to actually go from a smile to a hello. And finally one day, it was in April of a long time ago, that I was walking home and I noticed her a few feet in front of me, and I sped up my pace and I finally got the nerve and I said, "Hello, can I walk you home?" And she said yes, and I walked her home, and I was very surprised that her home was about less than 2 blocks away from my home.
Okay.
So
in New Jersey.
In New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started talking, and it made it a very easy courtship, because she was so close out walking distance from my home, and it was just walk 1 block this way and 1 block the other way, and I was at her home. And all those years living so close to her,
and you didn't know
her. But that's where we began, and it was probably maybe a year and a half into our dating relationship that we made a pact. I asked her to come to church with me.
Okay.
And she said, "Well, I'll go to church with you if you come to church with me." So we made this pact that I would go to church with her on Sabbath, and she would come to church with me on Sunday, and we did it. We got each other's parents' permission because we were both minors at the time, and that Saturday I went to church with her. I got to meet her church family, and that was truly the family. I remember as I was, the pastor that preached was actually her uncle, and he, after the sermon, as the guests were leaving, he shook my hand really firmly. He embraced me. He actually lifted me up. I remember my feet dangling as he lifted me up, and then he said, "We're so happy to see you here." And then he said, "Wait 1 second," and he ran up the stairs and he came back and he handed me a book, and it was The Steps to Christ. And I just very, very grateful that I had that warm greeting. But then the following day was my turn to bring my girlfriend to church, and I wanted my friends and everyone from the church to see her and to see me with her, and I was very proud. I still remember to this day the yellow 2-piece suit that she wore, and I was so impressed. She prepared for church, and I was very proud that she was my girlfriend, and went to church and sat through the church, and there was no, can the visitors please stand up? There was nothing like that. After church, it was as if nobody saw her. Nobody came and said hello to her. Nobody came to, say, "Hey, Hector, your girlfriend's pretty." Nothing like that.
No acknowledgement, no embrace.
There was absolutely, there was crickets. There was nothing. And that was
it.
That was it. And I was.
Was there any friction, because now you felt welcomed at her church, but your mother was still part of the other church. So was there any friction at the beginning? Any
there
challenges?
Was a lot of family friction, because it was not just my mother's church, or my aunts, my cousins, they were all part of the Jehovah's Witness church.
Oh,
My grandmother, my this. It had become my family's church, my extended family's
got it.
church. So when I decided that I was no longer going to attend, there was a lot of pushback, a lot of, there was.
How did you handle that?
I just accept it was what it was. It was, it started with they're saying they were trying to make it seem like it was just a phase for me that I would grow out of, or I would get another girlfriend and come back. But it had grown into much more than that, and it with my family, they just had to accept it, and later I got to baptize my mother in 2001, and that was the ultimate when she left the church for my grandmother and her sisters, but it was there was that pushback. I remember one time one of my aunts going. I would give my blessings to my grandmother, go to visit her, give my blessings to my grandmother, and then one of my aunts came to visit her mother, my grandmother. And I saw her in the parking lot, and I went to say bendición. You ever heard that formal, respectful greeting? And she said hi, and she opened the window that much of her car window that much, and she said hi, and then she closed the window again. And I hadn't seen her in years, and that was all I got.
So basically, they were shunning you for.
That's correct.
For leaving
they were cutting me off.
Wow. That must have been painful for a young man.
It was what I expected, because having been a part of the Jehovah's Witness Church, that's pretty much what I grew to expect.
Got it.
So I was when it happened, I was. It didn't hurt my relationship with my growing relationship with the Adventist church.
So from there, you're starting to go to church with your girlfriend.
That's correct.
That became now your church. And where'd you guys go from there? Like, how did the relationship progress?
It just, we grew together. We were growing up together, learning new things, learning about the education system of our church, deciding where to go after high school, and then being in,
because when you guys met, you were still in high school.
That's correct, and we finished in public high school. But it was that same uncle who said, you really need to go to one of our church schools, one of our church colleges, and he was the one that helped me with filling out all the paperwork, the application, and the application for scholarships, for financial aid, and said, this is the school you need to go to, and helped me a great deal. And then we just planned that that's where we were going to go to school. And
so you two went to school together?
That's correct.
That's nice. Yes. When did you guys get married?
Well, we got married right after high school.
Oh, you guys got married right after high school?
We've been together since 10th grade of high school, right after graduation, in between going away to college. We went away to college as a married couple.
Few years ago, that wasn't that big of a deal. Now people are like, what?
No, it's what we had to, we were very young. We were wanting to do things the right way, and very much in love with each other, and just wanted to be together.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not a bad thing, because you guys grow together and you go through things together and you learn whatever it is about life together.
That is correct.
What did you do in school?
I didn't start off as a theology major. I went wanting to just do some general studies and thinking maybe I would eventually go into medicine.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to be a dentist. But it was attending one of our church schools and having to take those Bible classes, and having those amazing professors that were, because I was still a very young Adventist. very young Christian. Um, it was very helpful for me, you knowing our fundamental beliefs and knowing our early church history and those things having those things taught to me through a class.
Same thing happened to me. I went to school not thinking about doing theology or anything like that.
Yeah.
As I took the religious class, I started falling in love, and
Yes.
that's how.
That's good.
So that's how you ended up changing.
Feeling the calling through those Bible classes and just the lessons that I was learning, just feeling overwhelmed by what I was learning. Just felt maybe this is what God wants me to do, and is praying about it and feeling that, and then talking to the professors. And I remember I think it was a sophomore year of college, they would have these interviews with the professors, and then they would kind of give you their blessing whether you should continue. It was kind of like a weeding out for the theology program. And I remember going through that process and receiving their blessing. And that was very comforting to me, that this was the direction God wanted me to go. These were my mentors, not just my professor, but my mentors, and just hearing what they had to say.
It's kind of like affirming your call.
Right, very, very much so.
Yeah. So then graduated, where did you go?
During the years that I graduated, we were having recessions and calls were very hard to get during those years. And I remember not receiving a call, not receiving a pastoral call.
A call to become a pastor.
And I returned back home to New Jersey, continued staying active with my church, being young, being asked to lead our youth. So I would started with Pathfinders and became a Pathfinder director, and was often invited to preach at other churches, preach for the youth programs, for camp meeting and things like that. And
so basically God was guiding you to what he wanted you to do.
But in the meantime, God was preparing me too, because I was still a young Adventist, even still, and inexperienced.
And you were very young too.
Yes. So so my first work out of college was doing social work.
Okay.
So I got to see some eye-opening things as a social worker. Working with child abuse cases and things like that, and those things helped me mature, not just learn, but even mature.
Oh, I bet.
And but it was good preparation. But it was staying active in the church that I got to make connections. And one of those connections was with our educational superintendent of the conference. And he asked me to speak for camp meeting for the youth for the weekend. And then it was after that weekend, he asked me if I ever considered being a dean.
Oh, wow.
And I said, no, tell me more about it. And he talked to me more about it. And then I said, that's something that I would be very much interested in. So I had an interview and started working as a dean at of one of our boarding high schools, and was blessed to be able to do that for quite a few years, and then moved from one academy to a college, then back to another academy, and then it was a wonderful.
It's interesting how God guides our lives, right? Because I can see the passion that you have for youth, and how you weren't planning to be a dean. No. Actually, you were not even planning to be a pastor. No. But God trained you, put you in the right experience, and then he said, this is what I want you to do for the rest of your life. Yeah. And then from dean, this position now? That's correct. Okay, so today you are the youth director, my boss, for the Carolina Conference. Yes. So this is great. I really enjoyed this time getting to know you a little better. If you have one piece of advice for a young person that is still struggling, trying to figure out what am I going to do when I grow up?
Stay committed. I like I said, that those years that I graduated, many of my classmates did not get calls for pastoral ministry. Some of them lost that commitment and moved on to other things. They didn't stay connected with the church. They didn't stay. Some of them were very gifted speakers. Some of them were very knowledgeable with the Bible, and yet somehow over the years, maybe their disappointment or the frustration led them even out of the church. Some of them, and it was very disappointing not to receive that pastoral call, but knowing that my calling was more than just pastoral calling. It was sharing the gospel, no matter, even if I wasn't as a pastor. So having those opportunities, working with youth from very,
as a dean, you're doing God's work as much as a pastor.
Yeah. So my path to pastoral work, it was through the church was my dormitory, and having had an opportunity to have thousands of young people over the years. I was able to be a dean for almost 30 years, and through all those years, being able to make connections and opportunities to lead young people to know Jesus better. I thank God for that opportunity.
That is great. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for accepting the invitation one more time. I love this time that we got to know you a little more. Thank you.
Thank you.